I told myself it was a simple decision. Practical. Clean. I signed the registration form with steady hands and convinced myself that coming back to the circuit was just about unfinished business, about proving the fall hadn't ended me, that the quiet after my name vanished from the standings wasn't permanent. I didn't admit, not even privately, that I was also running from the silence of my house, from the evenings that stretched too long, from the version of me that only existed when there was no arena waiting. I thought I was choosing a competition. I didn't know I was choosing a reckoning. Before I go any further, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments. I mean it. I've learned place has a way of shaping what we're brave enough to admit. And if you've ever made a simple decision that quietly changed your whole life, I want to know where that version of you is sitting right now. My name is Alanis. I'm 32, and people in this world call me disciplined like it's a compliment and cold like it's a warning. I ride barrel racing on the national circuit. 3 barrels, 1 pattern, no mercy for hesitation, tight turns, controlled speed, the kind of precision that punishes doubt. I keep my head down, my mouth shut, my routine sacred. I don't give long interviews, and I don't smile for cameras unless I've earned it. What they don't see is the way I replay mistakes until dawn, or how the sound of hooves on packed dirt can steady my breathing faster than any prayer. I didn't grow up in a glossy rodeo family with sponsors and embroidered jackets. I grew up working. My first saddle was older than I was, and my first lesson came from a mare that threw me into a fence when I got cocky. Horses taught me early that trust isn't a feeling. You build it with consistency. My mother taught me to be useful. My father taught me to be quiet. Somewhere between those two teachings, I learned to survive by becoming someone who didn't need anyone. It wasn't romantic. It was just safer. 2 years ago, I disappeared. A bad fall during a regional final took more than my place on the podium. It took my nerve. People love to say riders get back up, like it's a switch you flip. Recovery was long, private, humiliating in a way I didn't expect. Physical therapy, nightmares. The first time I tried to lope again, my hands shook so badly I pretended it was the cold. When I returned to riding, it was local, unranked, invisible. I told myself that was enough. Then the circuit announcement hit my phone like a dare. And suddenly, enough felt like a lie I was tired of repeating. So I came back. Not because I missed the cheering. Honestly, I could do without it. I came back because the arena is the only place I've ever felt fully inside my own skin. The circuit is brutal. Yes, but it's honest. The stopwatch doesn't care about your past or your pain. It only cares about what you do in the next 15 seconds. I wanted that kind of truth again. I wanted to know if the version of me that used to win still existed, or if she'd stayed behind on the dirt where I fell. And then there was Luana. Even writing her name feels like tightening a girth strap. Necessary, uncomfortable, precise. Luana was everything I wasn't allowed to be. Confident in interviews, effortless in crowds, the kind of rider who smiled as she won and made sponsors feel chosen. We'd been rivals for years, trading podium places, trading looks that said more than words ever could. She rode like she trusted the world to hold her. I rode like I expected it to flinch. Every time we shared an arena, something sharp passed between us. Electric, unresolved, the kind of tension that didn't fit neatly into competition. When I pulled into the rodeo grounds that first morning back, the smell hit me before the memories did. Hay, diesel, coffee burned too long. Trailers lined up like confessionals. I focused on my routine. Unload, check tack, walk the ground, read the corners, control the variables. That's what kept me steady. I didn't expect to hear her laugh before I saw her. I didn't expect my body to remember the exact frequency of it, the way it carried across noise without trying, like it belonged in the air. Luana stood near the practice pens, hat tipped low, sunlight catching the edge of her smile. She looked at me like she'd been waiting, not surprised, not impressed, just certain. "Didn't think you'd come back," she said, and her voice wasn't unkind. It was worse than unkind. It was familiar. I answered with something neutral, about timing, about readiness, because neutrality is armor. She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell leather and dust and the faint bite of peppermint gum. "You still riding scared?" she asked softly, like she didn't want anyone else to hear it. My throat tightened. "No," I lied. Her eyes held mine for one long beat, as if she could see the lie settle behind my teeth. That night, after practice runs and polite nods, I found myself lingering by the barns longer than necessary. The circuit after dark is quieter, more honest. Horses breathe. People drop their masks. Luana was there, leaning against a stall, boots dusty, hair loose. We talked about nothing important: weather, footing, travel, but the conversation felt like circling, like testing a gate without pushing it open. At one point, she reached past me for a latch, and her fingers brushed the inside of my wrist. It was barely a touch. Light, incidental, almost nothing. My body reacted like it was a question. I didn't move away. She didn't apologize. We both just held still for half a second too long, listening to a horse shift in the straw like it was an excuse to stay quiet. I went back to my trailer telling myself it meant nothing. That tension is just another word for competition. But lying in the dark, I realized something had shifted, and it wasn't only my confidence. Coming back to prove I was still the best cowgirl was the story I could tell out loud. The truth was quieter and far more dangerous. The circuit hadn't just brought me back to myself. It had placed me back inside Luana's orbit, and I could already feel how much gravity she had. How easily one simple decision could pull my whole life out of alignment. The morning after that first night back, I woke before my alarm, the sky outside my trailer still bruised with early dawn. My body felt alert in a way it hadn't in years, like it remembered something my mind was trying to keep quiet. I went through my routine automatically, coffee, boots, hair tied back tight, pretending the heaviness in my chest was just nerves. It was easier to call it focus. Focus is respectable. Focus doesn't ask questions, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw Luana leaning against that stall, the way she hadn't stepped back when our space disappeared. The grounds were already alive when I walked out. Engines starting, horses nickering, riders stretching like coiled springs. I nodded to familiar faces, accepted quiet welcomes, felt the unspoken curiosity trail me. Comebacks always attract a particular kind of attention, half hope, half hunger for a fall. I could handle that. What unsettled me was how my attention kept drifting, how my eyes searched without permission. When I finally saw Luana across the arena, adjusting her saddle with practiced ease, my stomach tightened like I'd missed a step. We were scheduled in different practice groups, a small mercy I hadn't realized I needed. I focused on my mare, on the rhythm of her breathing, on the dirt under my boots. Riding is a conversation, and that morning I spoke carefully, asking instead of demanding. She responded beautifully, like she'd been waiting for me to listen again. The first clean run through the pattern steadied me. The second reminded me why I'd come back. Speed hummed under control, the turns sharp without panic. Applause carried faintly, but I didn't look up. I didn't want to see who was watching. I was cooling my mare when Luana appeared at the rail, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Still got it," she said. No sarcasm, no softness, just a fact, offered like a coin. I shrugged, wiping sweat from my neck. "It's early," I replied. She smiled then, quick and crooked. "You always did hate giving yourself credit." The familiarity of it landed heavier than any insult could have. Before I could answer, she turned away, leaving the words hanging between us like a challenge. The draw for the first round went up just before noon. My name sat 2 slots before hers. Close enough to feel deliberate, close enough to make comparisons inevitable. I told myself it didn't matter, that the ground would be the same, the clock impartial. But when I ran, every second felt watched. I rode clean, aggressive where it counted, conservative where it didn't. When I crossed the line, the time flashed fast enough to draw a murmur. I let myself breathe once, just once. Luana followed. She always did. Her timing impeccable in more ways than one. She ran harder, riskier. The kind of run that made people lean forward. She clipped a barrel by a hair and saved it with instinct that bordered on reckless. Her time beat mine by a fraction so small it almost felt personal. The crowd loved it. I felt something twist in my chest that wasn't anger. It was recognition. She rode like someone with nothing to lose. I rode like someone protecting something fragile. That afternoon stretched long and bright, the kind of day that makes you forget you're tired until you stop moving. Interviews, checks, quiet recalculations. Luana and I crossed paths more than once. Never alone, never touching. Our exchanges brief and controlled, but there was an awareness now, constant and humming, like a wire pulled tight between us. When she laughed with another rider, I noticed. When I spoke with a sponsor, I felt her eyes on me. It was ridiculous. We were grown women, rivals, professionals. I told myself that over and over, like repetition could dull the edge. The sun was low when the grounds finally thinned, most people retreating to trailers or town. I stayed back, brushing my mare, letting the quiet settle. That was when I heard footsteps behind me. Unhurried, familiar. "You always stay late," Luana said. I didn't turn right away, Someone has to make sure the horses get the calm after the noise. She stepped closer, leaning against the rail beside me. You say that like you're not talking about yourself. We stood there, shoulder to shoulder, watching dust drift in the golden light. She smelled like soap and leather and heat. You scared? She asked suddenly. Not teasing. Not soft. Just honest. I shook my head. No, I said, and this time it was mostly true. I'm careful. She nodded, considering that. Careful can win, she said. But it can also keep you lonely. The word landed heavier than she could have known. Before I could respond, her hand lifted, hesitated, then rested briefly against my back. Light, grounding, gone almost as soon as it was there. Good run, she added, as if that explained everything. I watched her walk away, the easy confidence in her stride, the way people moved aside without thinking. My skin tingled where she'd touched me, like a bruise that hadn't decided what it was yet. I finished up and headed back to my trailer in a daze, replaying the day in fragments. Times, turns, words, the weight of that almost nothing touch. I told myself it was adrenaline, competition bleeding into awareness. That's what rivalries do, I reasoned. They sharpen you. They make everything feel close. That night, sleep came in pieces. I dreamed of running the pattern with no barrels at all, just open space and Luana's voice somewhere behind me, calling my name. I woke with my heart racing, the echo of it still in my ears. Coming back to the circuit was supposed to be about proving something measurable. Times, placements, numbers that didn't argue back. Instead, it was already asking me questions I didn't know how to answer. And the most unsettling part was this. For the first time since my fall, I didn't want to ride away from the feeling. I wanted to see where it led. By the third day, the circuit felt like a town that had decided to keep secrets. The schedules were posted, the patterns set, the same faces looping past each other with practiced politeness. What had changed was the way my attention kept snagging on the small things, how Luana rolled her shoulders before mounting, how she checked a cinch twice even when she didn't need to, how her confidence had a quiet undercurrent of caution I'd never noticed before. I told myself noticing was normal. We were rivals. Studying each other was part of the job. Still, my pulse told a different story. We were placed in adjacent stalls after a last-minute shuffle, close enough that I could hear her horse breathe at night. The sound threaded into my sleep, steady and warm, and I woke less restless than I had in months. In the mornings, we crossed paths with coffee in hand, nodding like professionals, exchanging a sentence or two that hovered just short of personal. It was restraint that made everything louder. The unasked questions, the moments that wanted to stretch and didn't. The sense that something was gathering its weight. Midday heat pressed down during practice, the dirt tacky under hoof. I rode conservatively, focusing on clean lines, letting my mare find her rhythm. Luana rode after me, pushing harder than usual, and clipped a barrel she'd never miss. She swore under her breath and circled back, jaw set. When she dismounted, she paced once, then laughed sharply like she'd caught herself wanting something too much. I watched from the rail, my chest tight with an impulse I didn't recognize until it was already there. I walked over. You're rushing the second turn, I said. Neutral, technical, safe. She looked up, eyes flashing. You think? The edge in her voice softened when she saw my face. I nodded. Your horse is stronger if you give her half a stride. She studied me for a long beat, weighing pride against pragmatism. Then she adjusted her reins and tried again. The next run was clean. When she came off, breathless and grinning, she said, "Don't tell anyone you helped me." I smiled back despite myself. Your secret's safe. That was the first time the line shifted. Not dramatically, not publicly, just enough to change the way we looked at each other. We started talking in the margins. 5 minutes between runs, a shared bottle of water, a comment about footing that drifted into something else. She asked about my recovery without prying. I told her more than I meant to. I asked about her sponsors. She admitted the pressure scared her more than the riding. We didn't label any of it. We didn't need to. The evening before the semi-final, a storm rolled in, sudden and theatrical. Rain hammered the metal roofs, thunder rattling the air. The grounds emptied fast. I stayed to check on my mare, listening to the weather claim the night. When I stepped back into the aisle, Luana was there, jacket pulled tight, hair damp and loose. You okay? She asked, unnecessarily. I nodded. You? She shrugged. Storms make her jumpy. We stood there together, the noise cocooning us, the world reduced to breath and rain. She moved closer to soothe her horse, and I felt it. The pull, undeniable now. When she reached for a lead rope, our hands brushed, fingers lingering this time. I didn't pull away. Neither did she. The moment stretched, suspended, thunder filling the gaps where words might have gone wrong. She met my eyes, searching, asking without speaking. I swallowed, aware of the risk, the cameras, the consequences that would follow even the smallest misstep. I also knew that stepping back would cost something too. Luana broke the stillness first, her voice low. "We don't have to do this," she said, honest and careful. I nodded, because she was right. We didn't. The choice sat between us, heavy and bright. I took a breath, grounding myself the way riding had taught me. Centered, present. "I know," I replied. My hand was still in hers. The storm roared approval or warning. I couldn't tell which. She lifted her free hand and tucked a damp strand of hair behind my ear, a gesture so gentle it almost undid me. The touch was brief, reverent. My skin hummed where she'd been. "You're different since you came back," she said. "Stronger." I shook my head. "Braver," I corrected, surprising myself. Her smile was small, real. That too. We didn't kiss. Not then. The restraint was its own intimacy, a promise without terms. She squeezed my hand once and stepped away, giving us both space to breathe. "Good luck tomorrow," she said. I watched her go, aware of the echo she left behind. When I finally returned to my trailer, the rain had softened to a whisper. The air washed clean. I lay awake, replaying the near miss with a clarity that felt like choice, not fear. The semifinal came fast, nerves taut as wire. I rode well, clean, focused, alive. When I finished, I knew I'd left nothing on the ground. Luana followed and matched me, stride for stride, her run fluid and fearless. The times put us within a breath of each other again. The crowd buzzed, hungry for a narrative they could see but not name. I caught her eye across the arena, and something like understanding passed between us. Whatever this was, it wasn't a distraction. It was sharpening us. That night, as the ground settled into quiet, I stood outside my trailer and looked up at a sky scrubbed bright by the storm. Coming back had already given me proof. Of skill, of resilience, of the rider I still was, but it was also giving me something less measurable and far more unsettling. The sense that the bravest lines aren't always drawn on dirt. Sometimes they're drawn in the space between two people who refuse to pretend they don't feel the pull, and I knew, with a certainty that made my hands tremble, that the next step would change everything. The final day arrived with a brightness that felt almost deliberate, the kind of morning that makes promises it doesn't intend to keep. I woke steady, focused, the way I used to before fear learned my name. Coffee tasted right. My boots fit like memory. I told myself this was what progress looked like. Clarity, control, readiness. Still, when I stepped outside and saw Luana's trailer 2 rows down, my chest tightened with an anticipation that had nothing to do with the clock. We didn't speak much before the finals. There was a gravity to the hours leading up, a mutual respect for the quiet. When our paths crossed, we exchanged nods that carried weight, a look that said after. I rode first. The run felt clean from the first stride, my mare reading my cues like we shared a single pulse. The turn snapped, the exit flew, and when I crossed the line, the time flashed fast enough to pull a sound from the crowd that I felt in my bones. I exhaled, grounding myself. Done. Honest. Mine. Luana followed, and for a moment the world narrowed to her and the pattern. She rode with a confidence that was both thrilling and terrifying, the risk balanced by control. Her time came in a hair behind mine. Not enough to dull the crowd's excitement, but enough to shift the order. I watched her dismount, saw the flash of disappointment cross her face before resolve replaced it. She caught my eye, lifted her chin once, congratulations without words. Respect without distance. The awards passed in a blur, handshakes, photos, the weight of the buckle heavy and earned. When the noise thinned, when the arena exhaled, I found her near the edge of the grounds where the lights fell softer. "You earned it," she said, voice even. I nodded. "You pushed me," I replied. It felt true and necessary to say it out loud. She smiled, smaller than usual, more private. "I always will." We walked together without deciding to, the path unfolding like it had been waiting. The barns were quiet now, horses settled. The air cool against skin warmed by adrenaline. We stopped where the shadows pooled, just outside the reach of the last light. Neither of us spoke. The silence was no longer restraint. It was invitation. I felt the weight of choice settle, calm and precise, like lining up a turn you know you can make. Luana broke the stillness with a breath. "I don't want this to be a mistake," she said. "Not us." The honesty steadied me. "Neither do I answered. I stepped closer, slow enough to give her time, close enough to feel the heat she carried. She lifted a hand and rested it at my waist. Tentative. Grounding. I covered it with mine. The contact sent a quiet rush through me that felt less like hunger and more like recognition. When she leaned in, it wasn't urgent. It was careful, deliberate, as if we were both listening for the moment that would tell us yes. Our foreheads touched. We breathed the same air. Then her lips brushed mine, light, testing, a question held open. I answered by staying, by letting the kiss deepen, just enough to become real. It was soft and unguarded, the kind that lingers in the body long after it ends. When we parted, neither of us moved away. We stood there with our hands still connected, the night pressing in, the world reduced to the simple truth of contact. She laughed quietly, a sound edged with disbelief. "That wasn't in the plan," she said. I smiled, the tension easing into something warm. "Neither was any of this," I replied, gesturing at the dark, the quiet, the place we'd arrived without forcing it. She squeezed my hand once. Enough. The practical questions hovered, unspoken but present. Sponsors, schedules, headlines that loved a story they could simplify. We didn't solve them. Not that night. We agreed on something smaller and braver. Honesty. "Tomorrow," she said. "We'll talk tomorrow." I nodded, knowing that promise mattered because we both intended to keep it. She stepped back first this time, not retreating, just creating space we could choose to cross again. I watched her walk away until the shadows took her, my skin still humming with the memory of her mouth, her hand. I felt changed, not undone. Winning had proved what I'd come back to prove. The kiss proved something else entirely. That control doesn't have to mean denial. That courage can be quiet and still be complete. I went back to my trailer and slept without dreams, my body at rest in a way it hadn't been since before the fall. In the morning, the buckle on the counter caught the light, bright and undeniable. I picked it up, felt its weight, then set it down. The circuit had given me back my name. Luana had given me a question I wanted to answer with care. The path ahead wasn't simple, but it was honest. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to outrun what I wanted. I felt ready to ride toward it. The morning after the finals felt quieter than it should have. The grounds were already breaking down. Trailers pulling out, banners coming down, the circuit folding itself into the road. I moved through my routine with a steadiness that surprised me. Loading tack, checking on my mare, pretending the day was like any other. But the quiet wasn't absence, it was space. Space where thoughts had room to echo. Space where the memory of Luana's mouth lingered like a promise that hadn't decided what it was yet. I found her by the wash racks, sleeves rolled, hair tied back, hands moving with efficient care. She looked up when she sensed me, not startled, just attentive. "Morning, champ," she said, and the word didn't sting. It felt earned. "Morning," I replied. We stood there, close enough that conversation could have slipped into touch, far enough to keep it clean. We talked logistics, next stops, haul times, weather up north, like two people who knew how to keep things professional when it mattered. When she finished, she nodded toward the path beyond the barns. "Walk?" she asked, not a demand, an option. We walked without destination, boots crunching on gravel, the sun already climbing. The farther we got from the noise, the more honest the silence became. "I don't regret last night," she said finally, voice steady. I exhaled. "Neither do I." That truth settled between us, calm and solid. "I also don't want it to turn into something that messes with what we do," she added. I appreciated the care in her phrasing. "Me too," I said. "We can decide as we go. No announcements, no shortcuts." She smiled at that. "You always were the careful one." "And you always pretended you weren't," I shot back, and her laugh warmed the space. The next weeks put our resolve to work. The circuit moved on, and so did we, sometimes together, sometimes crossing paths like comets with predictable returns. We kept it contained at first, late coffees, shared notes about footing, quiet dinners after long drives. Touch came in increments, a hand at the small of my back to guide me through a crowd, her fingers brushing my knee when we sat close enough to share a program. The way she leaned into me when the day finally caught up. The restraint wasn't denial, it was intention. The first time we kissed again, it wasn't hidden in shadow. It was behind my trailer midday, the wind rattling the canvas. We were arguing about a pattern. Of all things, voices low, smiles sharp. She stepped in to make a point and forgot to stop. I didn't step back. The kiss came quick and certain, her mouth warm and familiar, my hand finding her hip like it had always known the way. We broke apart just as quickly, both breathing hard, eyes bright. "Still think you're right?" she murmured. "Always," I said, grinning. She kissed me again, shorter this time, and walked off like she hadn't just rearranged my afternoon. Word travels fast on the circuit, even when no one can say what they've heard. Looks lingered. Questions hovered. We didn't offer explanations, and most people respected that. Sponsors care about optics, yes, but they care more about wins. We kept winning. Not every time, no one does, but enough. When pressure spiked, we found ways to release it that didn't cost us anything. A shared run at dawn, quiet music in my trailer, the way she'd sit cross-legged on the tailgate and listen while I talked myself back into center. There were moments we misjudged. A laugh too loud. A touch too long. One afternoon a photographer caught us leaning close, her chin tipped toward me, my hand resting where it shouldn't have been. The photo never ran, but the fear did. We talked that night, honest and measured. "I don't want to hide like it's something to be ashamed of," she said. "I don't want to lose what we've built," I replied. We agreed on lines and promised to revisit them when the season ended. It wasn't romantic. It was adult. And it worked. The intimacy deepened, layered with trust. Nights together came carefully, town motels with quiet hallways, doors locked against the world. We learned each other without rush. The way she liked her hair pulled when she kissed me. Firm, but respectful. The way I needed my shoulders grounded before I could let go. The shared laughter when things got clumsy. The silence when they got serious. We didn't rush the morning after either. Coffee in bed, plans made softly. Goodbyes that promised return. Halfway through the season, I faltered. A bad run shook me, old fear snapping at my heels. I sat alone, staring at my boots, the noise a blur. Luana found me and didn't speak at first. She sat beside me, close, solid. "Breathe," she said when I couldn't. I did. "You're not back where you were," she continued. "You're here, with me." The steadiness in her voice anchored me. I ran again the next day and placed. Not first. Enough. By the time the circuit curved west, the shape of us felt real. Not public. Not secret. Intentional. We weren't erasing rivalry. We were redefining it. When she beat me, I congratulated her without flinching. When I beat her, she meant it when she smiled. Competition sharpened us. Affection steadied us. It wasn't simple, but it was clean. One evening, parked under a sky wide enough to make promises feel small, she traced the edge of my buckle with a thoughtful finger. "You came back to prove something," she said. "Did you?" I considered the question, then nodded. "Yes," I said, "just not what I thought." She leaned in and kissed me slow, the way you do when you're not afraid of being seen. In that moment, the circuit felt like a road instead of a test. And for the first time since I'd signed that registration form, I understood the difference. By the time we reached the southern stretch of the circuit, the days had begun to blur into a rhythm that felt almost domestic. Wake early, ride, compete, drive, repeat. The constancy should have dulled things, but instead it sharpened them. Every routine revealed small truths. How Luana hummed under her breath when she focused. How I counted steps when nerves crept in. We were learning each other in increments, the way you learn a trail by riding it again and again until the turns live in your body. The pressure, though, had changed. It wasn't just about times anymore. People were watching us differently now, not suspicious exactly, curious. Rivalry has always been easy to read. Respect, too. What unsettled them was the calm between us, the lack of sharp edges. When we stood side by side, it didn't look like a truce. It looked like alignment. I felt it in the way officials addressed us together, the way sponsors lingered a beat longer. I told myself we could manage it. I didn't tell myself what managing it might cost. The night everything shifted, the arena lights went dark earlier than usual. A power issue. The kind of inconvenience that rearranges plans and exposes seams. Riders scattered to town. Luana and I stayed back, tending to our horses, the quiet stretching until it felt deliberate. She leaned against the stall door and watched me work. "You're wound tight," she said gently. I shrugged. "End of season nerves." She shook her head. "It's more than that." She stepped closer, her presence a steadying weight. You don't have to hold it all alone. We talked. Really talked. About the lines we'd drawn. About the way hiding chipped at us even as it protected us. I don't want to disappear into this, I said, choosing my words with care. I don't want to lose what I fought to get back. She listened without interrupting, eyes steady. I won't ask you to, she said. But I don't want to be something you tuck away either. The honesty landed clean, no drama, just truth, placed gently between us. She reached for me then, slow and certain, her hand warm at my waist. The touch felt like permission, not demand. I leaned in, resting my forehead against hers, breathing her in. When we kissed, it was deeper than before, still careful, but no longer tentative. Her mouth moved with intention, my hands finding her back, pulling her close enough to feel her steady heartbeat. The world narrowed to contact and breath, to the simple fact that we were choosing this moment together. We broke apart, laughing softly, the tension easing into something lighter. We should probably stop before someone wanders in, she said, voice rough with a smile. I nodded, but I didn't move right away. I kissed her again, short, grounding, a promise without spectacle. When we finally stepped back, the night felt less heavy, not solved, just steadied. The next day tested us, interviews, cameras. A sponsor pulled me aside, asked about focus, with a look that pretended to be casual. I answered cleanly, honestly, without offering anything I didn't owe. Luana did the same. We didn't coordinate. We didn't need to. The alignment held. When we ran, it showed. Both of us sharp, present, alive. We placed first and second again, the order switching like it was part of a pattern only we could read. Later, alone in my trailer, she traced circles on my forearm while we debriefed the day. We're good, she said, not as reassurance but as fact. I believed her. We lay together without urgency, bodies close, learning the comfort of shared quiet. When her hand slid into mine, it felt like an anchor. I pressed a kiss to her knuckles, grateful for the steadiness we were building piece by piece. That night, I dreamed of the fall for the first time without waking in a panic. In the dream, I landed and stood up, dusted myself off, and heard Luana's voice calling my name. Not urgent, just there. I woke calm, surprised by the absence of fear. Healing, I realized, wasn't loud. It was cumulative. It happened in rooms with locked doors and conversations that didn't flinch. As the season's end approached, the stakes rose. Rankings tightened. Headlines sharpened. The choice we'd been postponing hovered closer. How visible we wanted to be, how much risk we were willing to carry together. We didn't rush it. We agreed to keep writing first, to let the truth of our work speak while we decided what else we wanted to say. On the eve of the penultimate stop, we sat on the tailgate under a sky wide enough to swallow doubt. Luana bumped my shoulder. No matter what happens, she said, I'm glad it's you. I met her gaze and nodded, me too. The words felt simple, earned. And for the first time since I'd returned, I felt certain that proving I was still the best cowgirl wasn't the point anymore. Choosing how, and with whom, I rode forward was. The penultimate stop of the season arrived like a held breath. Rankings were tight enough to make every decision feel amplified, every choice louder than it needed to be. I woke before dawn, listened to the low sounds of the grounds, and felt that familiar steadiness settle in. What surprised me wasn't the absence of fear. It was the presence of clarity. I knew what mattered. I knew what didn't. And I knew that whatever happened today, I wasn't riding alone in the ways that counted. Luana and I moved through the morning with practiced ease, sharing space without spectacle. A nod here, a half smile there, the kind of connection that didn't require proof. When we warmed up, I watched her from the rail, noting the small adjustments she'd made since our last talk. Shorter approach, quieter hands. She caught my eye mid-loop and tipped her hat, playful and private. I answered with a lift of my chin. Rivalry still lived between us. It just wasn't sharp anymore. It was honed. The first round was fast and unforgiving. I ran clean but conservative, choosing precision over risk. My time put me near the top, not leading. Luana went after it with confidence that bordered on bold, shaving a turn close enough to make the crowd inhale as one. She crossed the line ahead of me by a breath. I felt the familiar sting, and then the warmth of pride. I found her after, clapped once. Nice line, I said. She grinned. You taught me, she replied, and the truth of it landed easy. Between rounds, the waiting pressed in. I sat on the trailer step, replaying choices, feeling the sun climb. Luana joined me, offered water without comment. "Whatever you decide," she said quietly. "Commit to it." I nodded. Commitment had always been my language. I just hadn't known it could include someone else without losing its meaning. The final run demanded risk. I felt it in my hands, the question clear and clean. I rode like I trusted myself, like I trusted the work. The pattern unfolded the way it does when everything aligns. No hesitation, no reach too far. When I crossed the line, I knew I'd done all I could. The time put me first by a fraction so small it felt almost symbolic. I didn't celebrate. I breathed. Luana followed, and I held my breath for her. She ran beautifully, controlled, smart, fearless where it counted. Her time landed just behind mine. Second. Again. When she dismounted, she came straight to me. No detour. "You earned it," she said, and this time the words carried no edge at all. I took her hands, brief and grounding. "So did you." The cameras caught us then, the touch too clear to pretend it was nothing. Neither of us pulled away. The afternoon became a study in consequence. A reporter asked a careful question. A sponsor asked a carefuler one. We answered with truth that didn't overreach. "We're competitors," Luana said once, "and we respect each other." It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole story. The looks that followed weren't hostile. They were curious, recalibrating. The world adjusts when you refuse to flinch. That evening, we found a quiet overlook beyond the grounds. The lights a constellation below. The air was cool enough to feel honest. Luana leaned against me, her head fitting where it seemed to belong. "We can't keep pretending forever," she said. I nodded, resting my cheek against her hair. "I know." The admission felt like relief. We stood there, hands laced. The future not solved, but no longer avoided. She turned to face me, eyes searching. "Are you afraid?" I considered the question, the way it used to land like a challenge. "Of some things," I said, "not of you." She smiled, soft and sure, and kissed me. Slow, deliberate. A promise made without witnesses. I kissed her back, my hand at her waist, steady as a rein. When we parted, the night felt wider, not heavier. We drove back in companionable quiet, the road humming beneath tires. The season had one stop left. The rankings could still shift, the headlines could still bite, but something essential had already settled. I'd come back to the circuit to prove a version of myself still existed. What I was proving now was different and braver. That strength doesn't vanish when you let someone see you. Sometimes it sharpens. The final stop of the season unfolded under a sky that looked almost unreal, wide and pale like it had been scrubbed clean for an ending. I arrived with my body calm and my mind alert, the way it only gets when you've accepted whatever comes next. Rankings were tight enough to matter, but not enough to own me. What surprised me was how little I wanted to calculate outcomes. I wanted to ride well. I wanted to stay honest. I wanted to finish the season without folding myself smaller than I'd become. Luana felt the same. We didn't say it outright, but it showed in the way we moved, unhurried, grounded, present. We shared coffee before warm-ups, sitting on the tailgate like it was any other morning, her knee brushing mine. The touch was casual, unhidden, and my chest loosened at how natural it felt. A couple of riders noticed. No one said anything. The world kept turning. Sometimes the fear lives longer in your head than it does outside it. Warm-ups went smoothly, the dirt fast and forgiving. I focused on feel instead of force, listening to my mare, trusting the work. Luana watched from the rail, her expression intent and open. When I finished, she gave a small nod that carried more meaning than applause. I returned the gesture, feeling the quiet exchange settle my nerves better than any pep talk could have. We were rivals, yes. But we were also each other's anchor now. The first round was clean for both of us. I ran first and set a time that felt competitive but not untouchable. Luana followed and landed just behind me again, close enough to keep the tension honest. Between runs, the waiting pressed in like weather. Interviews circled, cameras hovered. A producer asked if the rivalry still fueled us. I answered simply, "It sharpens me." Luana smiled beside me and added, "It always has." The truth was layered, but it wasn't a lie. By the final round, the sun dipped low and turned the arena gold. I felt the familiar stillness settle, the place where noise fades and choices become clear. I rode with intention, letting the risk come where it belonged and nowhere else. The pattern opened, the turns snapped, and when I crossed the line, the time landed exactly where it needed to. I exhaled, a full breath, and rested my forehead against my mare's neck in thanks. Luana ran last. I watched without bargaining, without asking the clock for favors. She rode beautifully, fluid, brave, precise. Her time came in a breath behind mine. Second. Again, when she dismounted, she walked straight to me. No cameras in our way this time. "You were solid," she said. I nodded. "You made me better." We stood there, close, unguarded. Applause rolled around us like surf. And for once, I didn't feel like it demanded anything back. The awards came and went, the buckle heavy and bright in my hands. The season total put me on top by a margin that felt earned, not stolen. When the crowd thinned, we slipped away to the quiet edge of the grounds, the sky fading to indigo. "So," Luana said, nudging my shoulder, "best cowgirl." I laughed softly. "Careful," I replied. "You'll give them ideas." She grinned, then sobered. "What do you want now?" The question didn't scare me. That was how I knew I'd changed. "I want to keep riding," I said. "And I want to stop pretending the rest doesn't matter." She took my hand, her thumb tracing a slow, grounding line across my skin. Me too. We stood there, hands linked. The future not a map, but a direction we'd chosen together. She kissed me then. No shadows, no hurry. It was slow and certain, a kiss meant to be seen by whoever happened to look our way. I felt the ripple of attention, the pause in nearby conversation. I didn't pull back. When we parted, Luana rested her forehead against mine and smiled like she was done hiding. The moment didn't explode the world. It simply rearranged it. That night, alone in my trailer, I set the buckle on the counter and studied its shine. I'd come back to prove I was still the best cowgirl. The season answered that question clearly. But it also answered another one I hadn't known how to ask, that winning doesn't have to cost you connection, and love doesn't have to make you smaller. As the grounds settled into sleep, I felt ready for whatever came next, not because it was certain, but because I finally was. The days after the final rodeo felt strangely weightless, like the moment after a long-held breath finally releases. The circuit dispersed in different directions, trailers peeling off toward new roads, new towns, new versions of normal. For the first time in months, my calendar wasn't dictating every hour. I woke without an alarm, sunlight slipping through the trailer window, and felt something close to peace settle into my bones. Winning had closed one chapter. What came next felt quieter, and somehow bigger. Luana stayed. Not officially, not announced. She just didn't leave right away. We took our time packing, sharing meals cooked on a small camp stove, sitting on the tailgate in the evenings while the grounds emptied around us. Without the pressure of competition, I noticed different things. The way she grew thoughtful when she wasn't performing. The way her confidence softened into something steadier. She noticed things about me too. "You don't brace anymore," she said one morning, watching me saddle up. "You used to hold your breath." I smiled. "I don't feel like I'm about to fall." We drove together for the first stretch. 2 trucks in tandem, the road stretching wide and honest ahead of us. The radio stayed low, conversation easy. We talked about ordinary things. Family, favorite towns, where we might stop for good coffee. Ordinary felt radical after a season defined by stakes. When we pulled over at a lookout and stood side by side, the wind tugging at our jackets, I felt the shape of something sustainable forming. Not a fantasy. A choice. The circuit's attention hadn't vanished, of course. Messages came in. Congratulations, inquiries, invitations framed as opportunities. A few questions edged closer to the truth we'd begun living openly. We answered carefully, together. "We're focused on riding," Luana said once, her hand steady in mine beneath the table. I added, "And on doing it well." The answers held. The world adjusted. It always does when you stop apologizing for existing. One evening, parked near a quiet stretch of river, Luana cooked while I cleaned tack. The air smelled like sage and water, the sky turning pink and then deepening into blue. When I sat beside her with a plate balanced on my knees, she leaned in, resting her head on my shoulder like it had always belonged there. "I don't want this to be seasonal," she said softly. "Not dramatic, just honest." I set the plate down and turned to face her. "Neither do I." We talked about logistics, the unglamorous truth of distance and schedules. There were no grand promises, just plans, flexible and real. I'd spend the off-season training near her place. She'd come north when she could. We'd keep riding, keep choosing each other in the ways that mattered. When she kissed me then, it was unhurried, familiar. The kind of kiss that doesn't need fireworks because it trusts the flame will last. Later, lying in the quiet of my trailer, her arm draped across my waist, I thought about the version of myself who'd signed that registration form months ago. The one who believed control was safety and solitude was strength. I wasn't ashamed of her. She'd gotten me here. But I didn't need to be her anymore. Growth hadn't taken my edge, it had refined it. The off-season brought space to reflect, to heal without a stopwatch ticking. I rode in open fields, practiced without crowds, felt joy return to movement for its own sake. Luana joined me often. Our rides less about proving and more about presence. We laughed more. We rested better. The rivalry that had defined us didn't disappear. It transformed into something collaborative, challenging in a way that felt generous instead of sharp. When announcements for the next season began to circulate, they carried a different tone. Anticipation, yes, but also expectation. People wanted to see us ride again, together, against each other. I felt the familiar spark, but it didn't consume me. "Ready?" Luana asked one night, boots kicked off, her foot nudging mine. I smiled. More than ever. I understood then that proving I was still the best cowgirl had been the doorway, not the destination. The real transformation wasn't measured by buckles or standings. It lived in the quiet moments, the shared miles, the courage to let someone witness you fully. As the season faded into memory, I felt grounded in a way that didn't depend on winning. And for the first time, that felt like the greatest victory